Kerry was part of the legendary Von Erich family, a name that dominated professional wrestling during its golden years. But behind the fame, Kerry faced unimaginable pain, tragedy, and struggles that shaped his life in ways no one could understand. This is the story of a man who fought to live up to his family's legacy. Let's get into it. To understand Kerry's story, you have to know a bit about the Von Erich family. Led by their father Fritz, the Von Erichs were a dynasty in the world of wrestling. Fritz was a larger-than-life promoter and wrestler who built a wrestling empire in Texas, especially through his promotion, world-class championship wrestling. Kerry was one of Fritz's 6 sons, and boy, was he a standout. Known as the modern-day warrior, Kerry had movie star looks, incredible charisma, and athleticism that made him a natural in the ring. By the early 1980s, he was a huge star, competing against legends like Ric Flair and becoming a household name in wrestling. Fans loved him, and he was one of WCCW's biggest draws. But the Von Erich family wasn't just famous for their wrestling, they were also infamous for the tragedies that seemed to follow them. On June 4th, 1986, Kerry's life took a devastating turn. While riding his motorcycle, he was involved in a serious accident that nearly took his life. He suffered a dislocated hip and massive damage to his right leg. Doctors worked hard to save it, but after several surgeries, they realized his foot couldn't be saved. Amputation was the only option. Now here's where the story takes a twist. According to Kerry's brother Kevin, Kerry might have worsened his situation. While recovering in the hospital after surgery, Kerry tried to walk on his injured foot during the night. Apparently, he was just hungry and wanted to grab something to eat, but he re-injured the foot. This forced doctors to amputate it entirely. But wrestling manager Bill Moody, whom fans will forever remember as Paul Bearer, shared a different perspective on what really led to Kerry's amputation. According to him, it wasn't just the motorcycle accident that caused the damage. Moody claimed the real turning point came months later, in February 1987, during a wrestling match in Fort Worth, Texas. At the time, Kerry's injured foot hadn't fully healed, but he was adamant about getting back in the ring. To help him push through the pain, doctors administered a heavy dose of painkillers before the match. Sadly, this decision had dire consequences. The intense physical strain during the match, coupled with the numbing effect of the painkillers, made the injury far worse. By the time the match ended, the damage to Kerry's foot was beyond repair, forcing doctors to amputate. Whatever the exact timeline, it was clear this was a life-altering moment for Kerry. Losing his foot was devastating, but Kerry was determined not to let it define him. Despite losing his foot, he didn't stop wrestling. Kerry got a prosthetic leg and went right back to performing. And here's the wild part. He kept the amputation a secret from almost everyone. Fans didn't know. Most wrestlers didn't know. He even went to the extreme of showering with his wrestling boots on so no one would see. But as with any secret, some people knew. Wrestling legend Roddy Piper later revealed that Kerry trusted him enough to take off his prosthetic leg in private. Piper said that Kerry sat with him in a hotel room, prosthetic off, just talking about life. It was a rare moment of vulnerability in a career built on presenting strength. Kerry's determination to keep wrestling after the accident was inspiring, but it came with a cost. The pain from his injuries never fully went away, and the emotional toll of losing his foot weighed on him heavily. To cope, Kerry turned to painkillers. What started as a way to manage his physical pain quickly spiraled into addiction. Over time, Kerry's drug problems grew worse. He faced legal trouble, including 2 arrests for drug-related charges. The first resulted in probation, but the second was much more serious. It violated his probation, and he was facing the possibility of significant jail time. Kerry's world was crumbling, and it seemed like he couldn't find a way out. On February 18, 1993, just 15 days after his 33rd birthday, Kerry made a devastating decision. He went to his family's ranch in Denton County, Texas. Before leaving, he hugged his father, Fritz, and told him, "Dad, I love you." Then Kerry walked into the woods and surrendered his life. Kerry's death shocked the wrestling world, but for those closest to him, it wasn't entirely unexpected. According to Bret Hart, Kerry had been struggling with suicidal thoughts for years. During a road trip in 1990, Kerry confided in Bret, saying he felt like his brothers who had passed, David, Mike, and Chris, were calling him. Bret tried to talk him out of it, urging him to think about his daughters. But Kerry's pain ran deep. By 1992, his marriage had fallen apart, and he felt more lost than ever. Despite all the tragedy, Kerry and the Von Erich family's contributions to wrestling are unforgettable. In 2009, the entire Von Erich family was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. The ceremony took place at the Toyota Center in Houston, Texas, and it was a touching tribute to one of wrestling's most famous families. Kerry's daughters, Holly and Lacey, attended the event with their mother, Kathy. WWE created 2 Hall of Fame rings with Kerry's name engraved on them, and his brother Kevin gave those rings to his daughters. It was a bittersweet moment, celebrating the family's incredible legacy while acknowledging the pain they endured. As much as I would like to leave it on this heavy note, I also want you to enjoy his legacy. He was a true wrestler and he deserves your few minutes. Let's start from the start, shall we? Kerry Jean Adkisson, better known as Kerry Von Erich, was born on February 3, 1960. He was the son of wrestling legend and promoter Fritz Von Erich, and like his brothers David, Kevin, Mike, and Chris, Kerry was destined for the wrestling ring. But before stepping between the ropes, Kerry was a standout athlete in another area, track and field. In high school, Kerry was a discus-throwing phenom, even setting records. He was so good that he trained to compete in the 1980 Summer Olympics. Unfortunately, the U.S. boycott of the Games meant he never got the chance to show the world what he could do. But hey, Kerry didn't let that stop him. He took that athleticism straight into the wrestling world. And fun fact, his discus skills inspired one of his signature moves in the ring, the spinning discus punch. Kerry made his wrestling debut on May 7, 1978, in his dad's promotion, Big Time Wrestling. Right away, fans could tell Kerry had something special. He was built like a superhero, moved like an athlete, and had this magnetic charm that made people cheer for him. He quickly became one of the promotion's rising stars. In those early days, Kerry teamed up with various wrestlers and won several tag team championships. But he wasn't just a tag team guy. He was destined for bigger things. In 1980, Kerry won his first major singles title, defeating Gino Hernandez for the NWA American Heavyweight Championship. That was a huge moment for him, even though he lost the belt shortly after to Ken Patera. But you know Kerry, he came back swinging, winning it again from the masked superstar not long after. In 1982, he started feuding with the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Ric Flair. Now, if you know wrestling, you know Flair was the guy at the time. He was the measuring stick. So for Kerry to go toe-to-toe with Flair was a big deal. On August 15, 1982, Kerry got his first shot at Flair's title in a 2 out of 3 falls match. Even though Flair walked away with the win, Kerry showed the world he belonged in the main event. But it wasn't just Flair who became Kerry's rival. Around this time, another feud was heating up, and it would define Kerry's career, the Von Erichs versus the Fabulous Freebirds. The pinnacle of Kerry's early career came on May 6, 1984, at the David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions. The event was held in honor of Kerry's brother David, who had tragically passed away a few months earlier. Over 45,000 fans packed into Texas Stadium to watch Kerry take on Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. And guess what? Kerry did it. He beat Flair to become the NWA World Champion. It was an emotional victory, not just for Kerry, but for the entire Von Erich family. That moment wasn't just about a wrestling title. It was about honoring his brother's memory and giving fans something to celebrate. Kerry Von Erich didn't just stick to Texas when building his wrestling career. From 1979 to the mid-1980s, he traveled the world, competing in some of the biggest wrestling promotions of the era. He worked for All Japan Pro Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Mid-South Wrestling, Championship Wrestling from Florida, and Central States Wrestling, to name a few. Wherever he went, Kerry's charisma and athleticism made him a standout. In Florida, he teamed up with his brother David, but not in the way you might think. They played the bad guys. David was the loudmouth, arrogant, spoiled rich kid, while Kerry brought his own flavor as a cocky, self-absorbed muscle man. Fans loved to hate them, and it added a whole new dimension to Kerry's early career. Kerry's success wasn't just about tag teams or heel antics, though. He made his mark in singles competition as well, particularly during his time with the St. Louis Wrestling Club, where he held the NWA Missouri Heavyweight Championship in 1983. This title was a big deal, often seen as a stepping stone to the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. And speaking of big moments, Kerry made his Madison Square Garden debut in 1980, defeating Jose Estrada. Wrestling at the Garden is a milestone for any wrestler, and Kerry's victory there only added to his growing reputation. Over the years, he continued to shine, including a memorable appearance for the American Wrestling Association at Super Clash in 1985, where he defeated Jimmy Garvin to retain the NWA Texas Heavyweight Championship. By 1989, Kerry was wrestling under the United States Wrestling Association banner, continuing his dominance at the Dallas Sportatorium, a venue synonymous with the Von Erich name. Under the USWA, he teamed up with Jeff Jarrett, and together they captured the tag team titles. Kerry also reclaimed the Texas Heavyweight Championship twice, proving he was still a force to be reckoned with. One of his most memorable feuds during this time was against Matt Bourne, who turned heel in a dramatic ringside interview. The feud escalated to the point where the two brawled outside the arena in a raging thunderstorm, a moment fans in Dallas still talk about. Kerry also faced off against his former manager Percy Pringle, who had turned heel and aligned himself with other villains. The drama was intense, but just as things were heating up, Kerry made a surprising decision to leave USWA and join Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation. In 1990, Kerry took his talents to the WWF, where he was rebranded as the Texas Tornado. His debut was electrifying. On Saturday night's main event, he faced Buddy Rose, who, funnily enough, was also his very first opponent in his wrestling career, and picked up a decisive win. From the start, it was clear Kerry was going to be a major player. At SummerSlam that year, he got his big moment, stepping in for an injured Brutus Beefcake to challenge Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental Championship. In a match that thrilled fans, Kerry defeated Perfect to win the title. It was a career-defining moment and showed that he could hang with the very best in the business. As Intercontinental Champion, Kerry defended his title against all challengers, including a televised defense against Haku. However, after a 3-month reign, he lost the belt back to Mr. Perfect in a rematch. The loss wasn't clean. Ted DiBiase's interference cost Kerry the match in the championship. Not one to back down, Kerry quickly shifted his focus to getting revenge on DiBiase, and the two clashed in a series of matches. Even without the belt, Kerry remained a fan favorite. At Survivor Series in 1990, he joined forces with the Ultimate Warrior and the Legion of Doom in a classic elimination match. Though he was eliminated by his old rival Mr. Perfect, his team ultimately came out victorious. Kerry started 1991 strong, competing in the Royal Rumble match, where he entered 5th and lasted nearly 30 minutes before being eliminated by The Undertaker. He kept up his momentum, making his one and only WrestleMania appearance at WrestleMania 7, where he defeated Dino Bravo with his signature Tornado Punch. Throughout the first half of the year, Kerry was heavily featured and rarely lost a match. But by the summer, his push began to slow. He suffered his first major loss in August 1991 to the Warlord, and though he continued to compete in high-profile matches, it was clear he was no longer in the title picture. At SummerSlam, he teamed up with Ricky Steamboat and the British Bulldog in a 6-man tag match, earning a win against Power and Glory and the Warlord. By late 1991, Kerry's role in the WWF was beginning to diminish. He renewed his rivalry with Ric Flair when Flair joined the WWF, but the results weren't in Kerry's favor. On the UK tour in October, Flair defeated him multiple times. Shortly after, Kerry suffered a decisive loss to The Undertaker on the Wrestling Challenge. Though he competed at Survivor Series that year in the Royal Rumble in 1992, his matches were less prominent. By early 1992, he was relegated to opening matches and facing lower-level opponents like Barry Horowitz and Kato. While he won those matches, he wasn't moving back up the card. His final televised match in the WWF came in July 1992, where he lost to Shawn Michaels. Originally scheduled to face Papa Shango at SummerSlam in London, Kerry was replaced on the card and officially left the company in August. After leaving the WWF, Kerry returned to Texas, where he briefly held the USWF Texas Heavyweight Championship before losing it to Dynamite Dixon. In 1993, he made an appearance for Eastern Championship Wrestling at their Battle of the Belts event, facing Sal Bellomo to a double disqualification. Kerry also wrestled for the Global Wrestling Federation, teaming up with former rival Chris Adams. His final match took place on February 12, 1993, at the Sportatorium in Dallas. Teaming with Adams, Kerry faced Johnny Mantell and Black Bart, but the match ended in a disqualification. Though his career ended far too soon, Kerry Von Erich's legacy as a wrestling superstar lives on. From his early days competing around the world to his iconic WWF run as the Texas Tornado, Kerry had a career filled with incredible highs and unforgettable moments. As a member of the legendary Von Erich family, he carried on the tradition of greatness while making a name for himself. Kerry Von Erich's wrestling career was a journey filled with unforgettable moments, From his early days dominating regional promotions to his memorable run as the Texas Tornado in the WWF, he was more than just a member of the legendary Von Erich family. He was a star in his own right, beloved by fans for his athleticism, charisma, and larger-than-life presence in the ring. His time in promotions like Mid-South Wrestling, Florida Championship Wrestling, and St. Louis Wrestling Club showcased his versatility and potential, while his travels to Japan proved his appeal was global. Though his life and career ended, Kerry Von Erich's legacy continues to inspire fans and wrestlers alike. He embodied the spirit of resilience and passion, leaving behind a lasting impression in the world of professional wrestling. For all his highs and lows, Kerry will always be remembered as a true icon, a Texas tornado who took the wrestling world by storm.